Good day, everyone. My name is Mr. Chisum. So today we'll be looking at the pelvic bone. So this bone here is the pelvic bone, and the pelvic bone, like you can see, lies in the pelvic region. It plays a role in accommodating and protecting some visceral organs. So some visceral organs or internal organs that can be found sitting in the cavity here is the urinary bladder, the rectum, the uterus, the uterine tube, ovary, and the rest of them. They all are situated here. The pelvic bone house them and protect them. So we'll be looking at the different parts of this bone. So the pelvic bone is divided into three main bones. So the first bone in the pelvic bone is this bone here. You can see this wing-like bone. This is known as the ilium. Then the second part of the pelvic bone is this bone here. This is known as the pubis. So this bone here is known as the pubis. And also the final one, when you turn to the posterior aspect, you see the ischium. This part is known as the ischium. So we'll be looking at these different parts of the pelvic bone one after the other. So starting from the ilium here. If you look at the ilium is divided into two. We have the wing-like part, which is known as the wing of the ilium or the ala of the ilium. And we have this part that is inferior. This part is known as the body of the ilium. So this is the wing or ala of the ilium, and this is the body of the ilium. So coming to the wing of the ilium, so this part now is known as the iliac crest, and you can see this protrusion around here. This protrusion around here in the iliac crest is known as the tubercle of the iliac crest. Then having said that, the iliac crest is divided into three. The inner part is known as the inner lip of the iliac crest. The outer part is known as the outer lip of the iliac crest. And the middle is known as the intermediate zone of the iliac crest. While this protrusion here is the tubercle of the iliac crest. Then having said that, if you look at the medial part of the ilium, you notice this depression here. You notice this depression here. It's kind of a fossa. This is known as the iliac fossa. This depression here is known as the iliac fossa at the medial part. Then this protrusion here, just immediately after the iliac crest, is known as the anterior superior iliac spine. And this anterior superior iliac spine gives attachment to the sartorius muscle of the anterior thigh and also the inguinal ligaments. Then just directly below it, there is another protrusion there. This protrusion is known as the anterior inferior iliac spine. And this anterior inferior iliac spine gives attachment to the rectus femoris muscle of the anterior thigh and also the iliofemoral ligament of the hip joint. Then you know that they are called the anterior superior iliac spine and anterior inferior iliac spine because it is a protrusion at the anterior part of the ilium. Then if you turn over to the posterior part, you see another protrusion at the ilium here. This protrusion is known as the posterior superior iliac spine. Then just directly under it, there is another protrusion here, which is known as the posterior inferior iliac spine. So you can see the both of them are named posterior because they lie posteriorly. So this is the ilium. You can see just as this. You can see this is the ilium just as I have here. So if you notice at this depression here, around here, remember this is the iliac fossa. Then there is a depression at the medial aspect. There is a depression at the medial aspect here. This is known as the articular surface. And this articular surface articulates with the sacral bone. So this is the articular surface here, and this is the sacral bone here, articulating with the articular surface to form the iliosacral joint. To form the iliosacral joint. Then, if you notice, from the articular surface to the body of the ilium, there is a line that moves from the articular surface to the body of the ilium. This line here is known as the arcuate line of the ilium. So this is the arcuate line of the ilium. Then having said that, if you turn to the posterior aspect of the ilium, you can see I turn to the posterior aspect. You notice these lines here, the first one, the second one, and the third one. This line here is known as the posterior gluteal line. The one here is known as the anterior gluteal line, and the one here is known as the inferior gluteal line. These three lines give attachment to the gluteal muscle. Then, having said that, still at the posterior aspect, you notice a cavity at the posterior aspect of the ilium. Just after the ilium, posteriorly, you notice this cavity here. This is known as the acetabulum of the pelvis. So you can also see the acetabulum here. This cavity here articulates with the head of the femur. So this is the head of the femur. This is the femur. It articulates with the head of the femur to form the hip joint here. So to form the hip joint. So having seen the ilium, let's go over to the ischium first of all. So for us to do that, I'll turn this posteriorly so that we can be able to see the ischium. So this part is known as the ischium. This part is known as the ischium. And the ischium is divided into the body. This is the body of the ischium, and also the ramus. The body and the ramus. So the first feature we have in the ischium is this depression here. This big depression here is known as the greater sciatic notch. So this is the greater sciatic notch, and it gave passage to the sciatic nerve. It gave passage to the sciatic nerve. Then just directly below the greater sciatic notch, you see a protrusion that went to the midline. You can see this protrusion here. This protrusion here is known as the ischial spine. So this protrusion here is known as the ischial spine. It also gave attachment to some ligaments and muscles. Then, just directly below the ischial spine, you see another depression here. This is known as the lesser sciatic notch. And this lesser sciatic notch gave passage to different nerve and blood vessels. So that is it for the ischium. Then, this part, or this part here, is known as the ischial ramus. or the ramus of the ischium. So this is known as the ischial ramus. Then having said that, let's go over to the pubis. So this part is known as the pubis. And the first important fissure in the pubis, if you look at the midline here, just at the midline here, this is known as the pubic symphysis. Then, just after the pubic symphysis, there is a line here, or a kind of a protrusion here, known as the pubic crest. So after the pubic symphysis, you see the pubic crest here. Then after the pubic crest, you see the pubic tubercle. So this is the pubic tubercle, pubic symphysis, pubic crest, and pubic tubercle. Then another important feature in the pubis is the lami. You can see this lami, these two lami. These two, this one is known as the superior pubic ramus, while this is known as the inferior pubic ramus. The two of them are known as the pubic lami. Then the superior pubic ramus and the inferior pubic ramus form a hole here. It forms a hole here, and this is known as the obturator foramen. This obturator foramen gave passage to the obturator nerve. So that is it. So having said that, let me do a recap of what I've said so far. I said that this is the pelvic bone which supports and houses the internal organs, some internal organs in the abdomen. And the pelvic bone is divided into three. The ilium, this is the ilium, the pubis, and the ischium. And I told us that this is the iliac crest, iliac fossa, anterior superior iliac spine, anterior inferior iliac spine, the body of the ilium. Then coming to the ischium, I told us that this is the greater sciatic notch, ischial spine, lesser sciatic notch, then the ramus of the ischium. This is the acetabulum of the pelvic bone, pubic symphysis, pubic crest, pubic tubercle, superior pubic ramus, inferior pubic ramus, and the obturator foramen. Then another important thing that I didn't say earlier is that this is the sacral bone. You can see the sacral bone here. This is the sacral bone, and this is the coccyx. And the sacral bone articulates with the articular surface. It articulates with the articular surface of the ilium to form the iliosacral joint. So we've come to the end of these teachings. I'll encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Learn with Chisom Great. Like this video, share this video to your friends, comment on this video. Thank you very much.